Good morning, and welcome to day 2 of our symposium. A prophet is not known in her town, Conversations on Visionary Women. My name is Teresa Calpino, and I am a lecturer in the Department of Theology at Loyola University Chicago. And I'm coming to you live from my kitchen in Chicago, and it is my pleasure to greet all of you for the second day of the conference. Last night, we were treated to an energizing address and conversation, and we will carry on in that same spirit today. Our panel this morning is called Coming Home to Yourself, Unmuting Prophetic Voices, and will be followed by a lunch break by another panel, Women Leading in Media at 1:35, and then another panel, Conversation Among Colleagues, Let's Rethink Catholic Social Teaching at 3:30. A few logistics for the panel today. We will begin with some reflection using aesthetics with about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll have a guided meditation followed by an invitation to personal reflection. We will have some thoughts wrapping up on storytelling from the perspective of storytelling, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end of the panel. So on to the introductions for today. In her response last night, Dr. Brecht likened using one's prophetic voice to at times sitting on the edge of a whitewater raft. The three wonderful women on our panel today are on the ground doing the hard work of being prophets in their own towns, in their own countries, and I am honored to spend a few moments on the raft with them today and support their work. Sister Anne Arabome is the Associate Director of the Faber Center for Ignatian Spirituality at Marquette University in Milwaukee. She is a member of the Sisters of Social Service in Los Angeles, California, and she is a firm believer in the transformative and renewing power of the spiritual exercises. She is a chaplain and mentors people in various settings, and her theological expertise focuses on gender dynamics, the existential condition, and prophetic engagement of women in Africa and the diaspora. Dr. Cecilia Gonzelez-Andrieu is a professor of theology and theological aesthetics at Loyola Marymount University, where she also works on multiple initiatives in the Latinx community, especially with undocumented students and workers. She is a respected lecturer on issues of political theology, theological aesthetics, and Latino theology, and she is the author of Bridge to Wonder, Art as a Gospel of Beauty, and a contributor to America Magazine and other books in international journals. And last, but of course not least at all, Dr. Timone Davis, who is an assistant professor in the Institute of Pastoral Studies at Loyola University Chicago. And as she describes herself, a cradle Catholic who was a pewster until she discovered that she wanted to give more of herself to this, and in the process, reignited her spirituality. She also runs a business and is the treasurer of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. So now that we have our introductions, I will pass it on to Dr. Gonzelez-Andrieu.
I think Dr. Gonzelez-Andrieu is having a problem.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Is it, can you?
Sure.
You can't hear us?
Can't hear anything, it seems like.
Okay, she's gonna, sorry,
Okay.
I didn't mean to cut in here. We're just working this
No,
out.
but that's what
Hello,
I-
everybody.
Wonderful.
I'm Mike Murphy. You said you had a reflection to go first, or was that what Cecilia?
That's
here she
what
goes.
Cecilia was. No control.
No control. Well,
that happened to me. Mm-hmm.
That sums up our lives in COVID right now, I think, too. So let us see if we
so
can,
she can't share
Megan,
her
and
screen
we'll try to problem solve. Can we jump, Teresa, to something?
Sure. Panelists,
That's
getting help. Okay,
she's getting help.
good.
Well,
Sister,
I actually have the picture, I think.
wonderful. Let's,
But I don't know that I had the questions and comments that go along with that.
Timone, do you have access to the Google Doc? I think there you go. All of the questions should be in there.
I'm a little old fashioned in some
Sounds good.
regards. I'm just a little old fashioned.
All right.
There we go. Okay. So, how is it that I had all of this stuff at my fingertips while Cecilia is working on her end? So the theme of our conversation is about unmuting our prophetic voice, and particularly unmuting the prophetic voices of women. And for Cecilia, this begins with the honest realization of how muted and silenced we have been throughout our tradition, and how we continue to be. So she has a few questions in here just for us to kind of reflect on. What is it that what it means to be muted? Where does it begin? How deep does it run in our tradition? And a good place to start is by asking ourselves a couple of questions. So for those of you, it's like 100 of you, and I know you're not sitting at your computer without a pen and a piece of paper. And if you are, so then open up on your computer a little note thing or something, just to be able to kind of reflect for yourself.
I can't even get back to my meeting.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is
Hey Cecilia, we can hear you now.
you gotta here.
I
And here's
apologize.
Oh,
that's
good.
okay. But here's your picture. Will this work for you?
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
All right, I apologize. My computer has gone haywire, and my son was just in here trying to help me. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I am going to give it a try. And I really apologize. Computers will do that. So we got a little bit ahead here of the story, but I really thank my friend Timone for getting us there. I don't trust this computer at all, and I seem to be having problems again. So I'm going to get help again from my son.
Hold on. What are you trying to do?
He is here.
What are you trying to do?
No, we're having just technical issues. So
This is the world in which we live in right now, right? That
I need.
Cecilia, can you tell me what you're having trouble with?
Yeah, all my controls keep disappearing on my computer, so I can't get it to do anything at all.
So I think at this point, there's a couple things. I tried to make you a co-host. Did you receive a request from me to accept that?
I did not.
Okay,
but
then,
again,
so I think what might be a good idea at this point, no big deal, is why don't you go ahead and leave the Zoom and then rejoin us? And that might just reset the settings. And if that doesn't work, then maybe restarting your computer.
I apologize. It all worked fine during the rehearsal.
It's technology.
No problem. Yeah, sorry, Megan. No problem, Cecilia.
Yeah.
We can, as they say, pivot, right? So what's a good pivot, do you think, Teresa, for and Timone, and of course Sister Anne, at this juncture as Cecilia reboots? I could talk about lack of control all day long. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because I could say Cecilia and I studied under the same mentor, Dr. Alejandro Garcia Rivera, in theological aesthetics. And I don't know if you want to put the image back up there or wait for Cecilia, or
Well, a lot of what we're doing does revolve around this particular image. So I can put the image back up there. I mean, Cecilia has the additional reflection, questions, and conversation that she wanted to have around art. And I would say at this point, we can move into this and then she can fix it. I might break it, but I think Cecilia can fix it if I break it. So here's the image, and I started these questions. That gave you time to get paper and pen or to open up the note window that you have. But let's begin to think about, what is the word for God that you have for God in the community that formed you? What is the word for God that you have for God in the community that formed you? And she has some prompts. Is it Señor? Is it Lord? Is it Father? And so you write that down. What is your word for God? And then on the heels of that is, what is your image, or what is the image of God that goes along with that word? What is the image of God that goes along with the word that you have for God? Who is the God that you see in your mind's eye? How does your word and image for God sit with the image that you have before you? Does it meld into one? Does it contrast? Does it conflict? Does it disturb? This piece of work is by Harmonia Rosales, and it is called The Creation of God, and it reimagines the Imago Dei. So until Cecilia comes back, this would be a great time that I would, if you could put that, let's see, can it go in the chat? People can chat, right? Megan, they could just do a response right quick on it conflicts, it disturbs, it warms, it expands your word and image of God. What does Ms. Rosales' image do for you in terms of your own image and word that you have for God? I think I have to pop out chat in a different window. Oh, okay. Slowly but surely, some comments are coming in. All right, type away, type away. I'm checking them out. because someone is already an artistic person, and so that's just an artist and a theologian. Oh, Cecilia is back. So Cecilia, people have written down their word for God, and they have an image for God. And I have asked the question of how does this image from Harmonia Rosales, how does it stack up against theirs, right? Does it complement? Does it disturb? Does it expand? Does it warm? And so what you have coming up in chat right now are people's response to that question. All yours.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I apologize that I'm not able to share my screen with you, but we do have here the image. And what I would like you to think about is the image that this is based on, right? If you know that image, that is the Sistine Chapel creation of Adam. And we have a white bearded God and a very muscular young Adam. And the image, when we look at it, right, it's called the creation of Adam. And it's really about the making, right, the moment, the bringing about of the human. And so it's really about the Imago Dei. And so when Timone asked you how this disturbed your image of God and hopefully reinvigorated, it's because it's about our image. And if God, as in Michelangelo's piece, is this bearded white male who then creates white humanity, male humanity, women are muted and excluded from that image of God, right? We historically are left out, and that image from the Sistine Chapel is like our most overwhelming image of God. So as I'm looking at your comments here, right, that you feel this dissonance and this power, hopefully, with this image. The complexity of this image is really something. So I want to talk a little bit about it with you because, well, first of all, let's talk about the artist. Armonia Rosales. Armonia Rosales was 33 years old when she made this work. She is a self-taught artist out of Chicago, Afro-Latina Cubana like me. And she made a work that in many ways matches and surpasses the work of one of the greatest artists in history. But when this work went out into the world and it started being shared on social media, she made this in 2017, it went viral. And at first, right, you're like, oh, this is really great. Like thousands of people are sharing this. But she started getting a lot of hate. She started getting a lot of acrimony and violence, verbal violence against her because people were so disturbed about what she was proposing. And they should be. I think that's the entire point, right? But they couldn't even take a moment to allow for the fact that here was an incredible work of art made by a young woman who had taught herself how to be an artist. Now, more about her, she's a single mother, right? And this image also is one that speaks to that. So now she made some real important changes to the work by Michelangelo, and I'm going to just point out a couple of them. Beyond the fact, right, that these are beautiful, glistening Black women, both the human and God, right? She takes notice of Adama. Now, Adama in the biblical is not a male name. It means red earth. And the woman here, the human, more concretely said, is made out of the red earth, as in the story in Genesis. She still has some of it on her. Notice on her foot, notice on her thigh, she's still part of the earth. She's not separate from the creation. The creation and her are one. And then she makes another really beautiful innovation, which is, if you notice over in the mantle where God's glory is, right? And it's spreading into the sky, there is earth there too. The red earth is apparent and beautiful and presented right there in God's own world, right? So this is not only, right, an image of God's creation of the human and of being made in God's image, of this beautiful Black grandmother who creates, but it talks a little bit about God's immanence in our world, right? That God and the human are not that far apart, that God, she gets into the garden, she gets full of dirt, she is part of it with us. So my intention in bringing this image to you was to say that as women, for us to be able to recover who we are, the first thing is that we have to see ourselves in the image of God. And the image of God needs to be changed and tweaked and reimagined in us. And in that way, then we can have this beautiful image. And it can be our image for ourselves, and it can give us back our voice. So I hope you'll keep this image with you, and I hope that it will be a very invigorating image for you. My friends.
Okay, we'll turn it over then to Sister Anne.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. I'm reading the charts here and I'm feeling really consoled by some of the affirmations for this image. Did any particular image of God, for just as we saw the picture and listened to Teresa and to Timone and to Cecilia, did any particular image of God challenge your conviction? Are you comfortable with an image of God portrayed as a white male with a flowing white beard, leading forward to touch and quicken another white male to life? I certainly am neither impressed nor inspired by a male God who habitually transmits male power and energy to another male in total disregard for women. I honestly think any image of God that is an all-male affair is idolatry, pure and simple. Such idols, I believe, mute our voices, they mute women's voices and inflict harm on women's lives and bodies. An African proverb says that when sleeping women wake up, mountains move. That is what I see in Harmonia Rosales' The Creation of God. Her painting subverts our familiar and tired images of God, and I think offers us a refreshingly new, stunning, and different image where the divine transmits the energy of creation to another woman who embodies all of creation. But here's the most exhilarating part of her work. That is, both God and woman are black, pitch black, I imagine this may have struck some of you as scandalous and blasphemous, if not offensive. God a woman, God black. Well, whatever inner feeling this image triggered in you, for me, I would say it elicited an awakening moment. It opened my eyes to how our dominant images of God have degenerated into myriad mute buttons, such as sexism and racism, that see nothing of value in women of color, stereotypes and perversions that exploit female bodies for profit and pleasure. And most painfully, the silencing of women's prophetic voices by church and societal hierarchies. Contemplating this work of art awakened existential and visceral feelings within me. With much consternation, I realized how images can mute or unmute the prophetic voices or the voice within. Thankfully, my initial lament of violated women's bodies and muted voices has sort of transformed into a vision of hope. Why, you may wonder? I think it's because I have come to realize that women's voices cannot be silenced and muted ad infinitum. Because, like the god of Rosali's painting, we are legion. We are many. We are many. Maya Angelou puts it beautifully when she said, I come as one, but stand as many. I unmute my voice when I liberate the image of God from the shackles of patriarchy, sexism, racism, and misogyny, from all those socio-cultural, religious, and political demons that police how God can be imaged and whose body can validly image God. I take as a crucial lesson from her work that this art that Cecilia presented to us, is a powerful means for unmuting women's feelings, women's emotions, our desires, aspirations, dreams, and prophetic voices. Her work may shock, scandalize, and perhaps offend some people. This isn't who God is supposed to be, they protest. Well, however anybody feels about it, they cannot mute, they cannot mute this subversive, confident, and bold desire of women to discover in their bodies the fullness of the living God, who neither worships nor bows to an idol parading in masculine garbs. Looking at it from a deeply spiritual perspective, I believe art is also a way of unmasking subtle idolatries that populate our life of prayer. I believe it takes a contemplative attention to discover these idolatries and enter a place of devotion and reverence for a truly liberating encounter with God. This is perhaps one of the greatest gifts from St. Ignatius Loyola, who we know composed the spiritual exercises to help women and men unmask their inordinate and disordered attachments to a plethora of idols and false gods. For Ignatius, depending on whether an idol or God is active in our hearts, they cause movement of the spirit. This simply means that we experience in the depths of our heart a confluence and conflict of emotions that compel us to ask, what are my idolatries? Where is God laboring lovingly to topple the golden calves of gender injustice and similar vices? Like the experience of this painting that you can all see, this divine milieu of God's presence and action in our lives can lead either to consolation and joy or desolation and sadness. So back to Harmonia Rosale. This prophetic artist, I think, creatively portrays and names the dignity of woman as imago Dei, as the image of God. If you look at this painting, you see in their somber, raw, and captivating physicality, the women in the creation of God radiate the imago Dei, the image of God who dwells in each of us without exception. This depiction of God and woman, I believe, unveils a stunning awakening to life, to beauty and goodness, representing an energy that comes from a deep spiritual well. So in this tableau, we, all of us, we are witnessing the birth of a new spirituality of woman and man as imago Dei. The artist has listened. She has listened to God in her heart. Her experience not only unmuted her prophetic and creative voice, but also led her home to herself. Now, she opens this path, this same path, for us to find our voices, to reclaim our dignity and come home to God and to ourselves. To the women in the audience, I ask, who is your God? Does your God mute or liberate your inner feelings and prophetic voice? Or does your God muffle or set free the expression of who you truly are? Who is your God? So I would like to conclude by inviting you to a guided meditation to sit with this and you know some of the questions Timone and Cecilia already posed to us, to sit more deeply and see where the movement is within us. So allow your body to relax. Whatever you're doing, just take these few moments to relax. Let each breath bring you to your center. As if coming home to yourself. Be attentive to your feelings. What emotions does this painting awaken in you? Do you experience joy, anger, betrayal, sadness, shock, curiosity, loss, liberation? Is it consoling, or does it bring you to a place of desolation? Be attentive to your intimate feelings. Is something beginning to open within you? Perhaps an idea or experience that you have never paid attention to? Is this story, is this image touching a story in your life? What creative spirit has been muted inside you? What spirit yearns to be unmuted in your life? Embrace it. Let it remain unmuted. This for now, let it remain unmuted. Liberated. And now, gradually, gently, open your eyes and return to this space, awakened and empowered to use your unmuted prophetic voice to recover and tell your story. Be at peace.
That was so beautiful, Sister Anne. Thank you. Thank you so very, very much. You know, I had a chance to have an email exchange with this amazing artist, and what I found so powerful in what she said to me was when I started talking to her about the depth of the insights that she was giving us here, she said, wow, you said everything that I know inside of me, but I just had to paint it, right? That part, I think, of our embrace of this image is the giftedness inside of each of us that is trying and wanting to communicate that small place where God is speaking, and that someone like Armonía Rosales could give us such profound amazing insights because she allowed that voice, even against all the people that were against her doing this and were angry about it. She still had to speak this word of truth. And so for me, it's really important that to say that artists can be prophets, and that part of the awakening of ourselves and our voices is to pay attention to everything around us that's speaking creatively, because women, that's where we're speaking, and that's where we have been speaking throughout history. And women who are all over the world, who may have never had a chance to be in a library or read a book, have such profound, amazing things to say. And if we awaken ourselves to their weavings, their songs, their art making, we're going to find out a lot about how God is speaking in our history. So part of my encouragement is for us to have that sense of wakefulness to the beautiful, important work being done by women.
Cecilia, I'm really glad that you jumped in there after Sister Ann, because I was like, oh, okay, Ann, thank you for the meditation. And now I think I still want to meditate. I think I need to still be where you took us, but it's my turn now. So let's recover from that, right? I am still swimming from last night's keynote to this art piece to, well, let me just say it this way. I am a firm believer that when disruption happens, right when goodness is about to be brought forth, that the enemy knows that it's going to be really, really good and really gets in the way of trying to stop things. So I don't know how the rest of you all feel, but what we're talking about now is just on the cusp of change and greatness and explosion. So be ready for that. Maleness, masculinity, and men have been trying for decades, for thousands of years, even to mute femaleness, femininity, women. But like a faulty remote, she, her, hers will not be kept on mute. But what to say? Story helps us to understand others and ourselves. As we journey into stories, we learn how to figure things out. There, in the story, we become familiar with voice. And then what happens? We start to value other voices over our own. As external voices speak louder, we find that our own voice is not just muted, but silent, because we have stopped using it. So what do I really mean by voice? Voice, as I am using it, is linked to identity. For voice is what is used to alert others to one's presence. Voice that is lifted in story. And so since I'm always talking about story, let me talk about a story that happened at a party, a feast actually in Cana, where the wine was running low, right? And this is a big party because Jesus is there with his entourage and Mary is there with her girls. Now, interestingly enough, you know, you've got a young adult at the same party that his mom is at. So you know that this has got to be a really nice party, but the wine is running low. And so that's an issue if the wine is running low. And there's this prophetic voice of Mary, and she changes the outcome. I think in a lot of ways, when we hear this story, we listen to this story about Jesus changing this water into wine, but we tend to dismiss who provoked Jesus into action, who spoke a word that said, this is what needs to happen. right? Jesus's response to his mother is like, you know, what is this to you? It ain't my time. I don't have time for that. You see, I'm chilling with my guys, right? Why are you interjecting? And this prophetic voice of Mary, just do whatever he says. So now she not only speaks, she disrupts her son, but then she ignores his rebuttal and then walks away with, you all do whatever he says, with a confidence that says, this is going to get done. I wonder how often a woman's voice has snuck in a way that we haven't paid attention to, but it has changed the course of action. I want to say that women are still finding their way through a difficult landscape in a male-dominated world. But Mary invites us to speak no matter what the possible responses are going to be. Now, this is a quick story because I typically tell that story in a good 30 minutes, but we don't have 30 minutes because I like to draw it out and get the whole drama into what was really happening, right? But this quick story is in the shadow of this particular art piece where we are asking people to lift up their own voice, right? And in lifting up your own voice, I think you begin to see how you can be an advocate for other voices. I'm in a space now where I don't want to be the voice for the voiceless. I don't think anyone needs to be a voice for the voiceless. I think that I need to learn how to use my voice that invites the other voice that is not speaking to speak. And I think in doing so, we come to value one another because then we see one another, right? And so this question of a prophetic voice, what makes it prophetic? Well, the fact that you use it, the fact that it's yours and that you lift it up because you see something different the way I see it. And when you see it, you say so, right? And so when you say so, it invites me to question. It invites me to dialogue. It invites me to interact. And then I can see you differently and you see me differently. Unmuting our voices challenges the status quo. And voices that are prophetic when used for the common good. And the common good, Sister Carol Zinn unpacked for us last night. I was so excited when she started unpacking the common good because I was like, I talk about the common good for my part of the panel. I was too excited. So I don't want to get too far into, well, what is the common good? Just go back to the keynote, right? And find out, well, what did Sister Carol Zinn say about the common good? Our voice, when used for the common good, helps us to exist in this COVID-19 era. It helps us to exist and work for the removal of racial injustice and unrest and police brutality, because our voice is used to speak to those things. And when we speak it, we start moving into the space of peace. But I'm not talking about peace that is just the absence of violence, but peace that struggles, peace that strengthens, peace that goes below the surface, peace that sees and values you, peace that values me. This is a peace that loves, and this is a peace that hopes. This is what happens when we begin to use our voice. When we take it off of mute, right? Our batteries and our remote are not dead. And we need to use that to remove the mute piece. So this is a point in what we hope to elicit some more dialogue from you all. And I've been reading a lot of the chat right now. But what say you? What say you about what we have laid before you? And how you can reclaim your voice, unmute your voice, share your story, find who you are. And in doing so, invite another person that finds who they are. So let's do this thing, right? Let's change how people are doing webinars where you just listen to some people say some things and you don't get to have anything to say. Let's let the chat go. Would you want, so let me ask you this though, while you're thinking about what you want to ask any one of us, would you like me to leave the image up there, or would you like me to take it down so that you could just see our faces more?
It seems like we have some
image.
people, yeah, saying to leave the image up.
No problem. I don't have a problem. So what
Okay.
say you all? It's a lot of you on this. I think we're up to like 90 of you. I know there's something happening. Okay.
Okay, so we are going to go into the Q&A portion of our panel this morning. And so just to kind of let you know to type your questions for the panelists into the Q&A box. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A function, if you bring that up, you should be able to type, and you can tell us which of the panelists you would like to direct your question to, or to all of the panelists, and we'll go ahead and manage it from there. I do want to also let you know that once we have opened the Q&A function, we are disabling the chat so that we can avoid confusion about where you should be typing those questions. But the chat, I think, has been so fruitful and wonderful. I'm so glad that we had the lucky accident of having it open, because people were really able to share so many things. I'm sure that the panelists agree with that, but you know,
I do. I'm reading something right now that says, you know, like the image was at first scary, but the truth of God has created us, right? And the mother and nurturer of creation, and just the fact that the image moves us to a us versus a them, right? Like, it's easier to see us in this particular image than it is to see it in the, you know, the image, you said Michelangelo's original image, right? Where you don't necessarily see us, but see men. And I think it's interesting that when you see women, people have then a more inclusive view or understanding of people and creation when you see women. Wow, have we silenced people for real by going to the Q&A?
No, I think we're just getting started. But there's been just to kind of reflect on some of the things that have been coming in during the entire panel, that one of our audience members noted that that they were very struck by the fact that the woman in the picture has clay, red earth still on her, and so it's that she is still in process, as we all are. As we all are in process of becoming more, unmuting ourselves, developing our prophetic voice. So I thought that that was a very lovely reflection.
You know, I'm thinking about that, the prophetic voice is in fact scary territory, right? Because you come to understand that much of what you say is not about you, right? You personally, but it's about God. It's about this kingdom that we're working toward. It's about us coming together, and that can be a scary place to be. I know it is for me. Let me just use I statements. It is for me, because a lot of what God asks of me is puts me in a very vulnerable space, right? Like the artist, this put her in a very vulnerable space. And so you also have to be willing to take on whatever is going to come your way when you become a prophetic voice. Okay.
So Timone, I actually have in the Q&A a question for you. Anger comes from understanding. I have a voice, but I can't use it effectively with the male clergy. Yes, some understand, but how crass, cruel, unjust to tell us during the time churches are closed that they can have Eucharist and we should have a spiritual Eucharist. Get real.
Please don't have me start talking about clergy. So here is something that my father, now deceased, told me. My father was the pastor of Faith Missionary Baptist Church. And I used to preach at his church a lot. And my father, as he was getting ill, kept reminding me that he was saving his church for me to take over. And I kept telling him, I said, you know, Dad, you remember I'm Catholic. And I don't think that's going to go over well with the Catholic Church, that I'm the pastor of Faith Missionary Baptist Church and I'm trying to be an active Catholic. I just don't think that's going to go over well. And he said, what is the biggest thing that is stopping you? And I said, the Eucharist. I said, you all don't believe in the real presence of Eucharist and you're limited to one time a month. And he said to me, his words in response just kind of blew my mind, and it helped me fully understand Eucharist in its expansiveness. My father said, teach the people. Teach the people. And I was like, what? And then I started thinking about, how do we as Catholics come to believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist? We're taught. We are taught. And so when you have this kind of crass and cruel language, for me, it's, you're limited in your thinking and your understanding of Eucharist to say, well, I get to have Eucharist and you don't. No, I still get to have Eucharist. You are tied to this ritual of Eucharist and receiving it in the bread and the wine, and you have limited yourself to an understanding of Eucharist that we get to live it in a much more expansive way. So that's like a response for our clergy who stamp on and stand on and lift up clericalism.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, Timone, because you're so right. Going off of one of the questions in the Q&A, that I think we need to be fearless. I really do. I think that if we keep this image with us, we have to confront the things that are completely incoherent with Jesus's own practices and Jesus's own life. And as you reminded us about the beautiful party in Cana and what happened there, right? We can't, nothing about Jesus has ever told us or shown us that there's any exclusivity and that anyone is ever excluded from the table. And so I myself will confront people, and I will do so lovingly, but I will say, what you're saying has to do anything with the gospel? Tell me that. Because what I'm feeling right now is that you are misconstruing it and you're saying it in the wrong way. Now, I know that's a scary proposition, but I think, do you know what the scripture passage, the idea, the most prominent idea in all of scripture is fear not. That is the most prominent. And so I think for women to just walk away from the fear and to say, do your worst. What are you going to do to me? How are you going to exclude me more than I already am? And bring it back to the gospel. You know, the Holy Father, Pope Francisco, keeps reminding us it's all about the gospel. It's all about the gospel. So let's go back to that. And you show me where Jesus is excluding people. You show me where Jesus is treating anybody as less than anyone else. Show me that place, because it's not there. And I think I want my students and I want my community to just be willing to speak up and to say, this is my church too. It's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. It's not your property. It's ours.
And Cecilia, thank you so much for that follow-up, because I think based on so many things that are happening right now in our context, that fear can be a place that we go to. Frustration, anger, fear, very easy. I'm wearing my RBG descent collar earrings this morning in tribute, and it is a moment where we can easily go to that space. So I thank you for those really wonderful words.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that, like,
please, yeah.
Like harmonium. I mean, we should not allow anybody in church and society to set a limit to our creativity or set boundaries to our voices. It's our voice. It is God-given, and we need nobody's permission to unlock and unmute our voices. Like Cecilia said, be not afraid, said Jesus Christ. So we have the power, and I think it comes from deep within. Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to move to another question and in the Q&A, and I think that this is an open question to anyone on the panel, is that please talk more about not aspiring to be the voice for the voiceless, but instead to be the one who encourages those who have not yet used their voices. So I wonder what you all think about that.
I think it's two-sided, right? I think first, if you are in a position of privilege, you need to make room. You need, and I like the image from John the Baptist of I decrease so you may increase, right? And so making room and taking away some of your power, I think that's a very important part of it. And so to always have a critical eye to what does this world look like? Does it look like a multicolored, beautiful environment, or is it all kind of based on people's powers and degrees and positions and all that? And step away from that and make room. I think that's one side of it. And then the other side of it is exactly as Timone said, the invitation. And I think she should say more about that.
So when I say that, because we hear people a lot talk about, I want to be a voice for the voiceless, right? First of all, that tells me that you know who the voiceless people are. So you are either in relationship with, or you have identified that here is a group that is not speaking. Well, why aren't they speaking? So what I'm asking is, how are we in relationship with people who aren't speaking so that they now feel that they can be invited to speak, versus, well, here am I privilege who get to speak for you, but I don't know what you really want to say. I presume that because you're in that position, that this is what you want to say, but I don't know. So to be a voice for the voiceless for me is to not really be in relationship. Because to be in relationship, now I am inviting you, as Cecilia says, now I'm moving out the way to invite you to the table. Here's a great example of what we do in church. We want young adults to be active and be part of leadership, but we don't move out of the way so that they can be, right? So, or we're gonna do a conference that's for young adults, but there are no young adults who are part of the planning. So we're speaking for the young adults, right? They're voiceless and we're speaking for them. Well, why aren't we in relationship with the young adults? Why are they not at the table, right? Why haven't we made room and allow their voices to come up so that they can plan this conference if it is a conference it's supposed to be? So that's just a quick example of this advocating, being in relationship with, versus let my voice be the voice that needs to speak for you. And part of that for me, oh, go ahead, Anne, because I was just going to say part of that is I don't want anybody speaking for me. So
yeah, and I think as women, like I said, we're legion, we're many. We have gifts, in our missions or ministries, in teaching or leading or managing. We need to see who is missing, who is not at the table, who has been excluded. We need to bring them to the table or make room, which means something has to give. So power, privilege, or entitlement needs to go. As Pope Francis says, we need to cultivate a preferential option for the poor. Let them speak for themselves. So create possibilities for them to recover their voices. And I believe this means being in relationship with, in the shoes of others. So I saw a question there as to how can we as women even facilitate this? And I think we can, or we should.
Thank you. I'm going to throw out a couple of questions and see where the panelists would like to answer or go with them. One of the attendees says, how can we expand the Imago Dei to folks who are non-binary, genderqueer? And what tips do you have for women who are often muted by other women? Many women mute each other rather than support each other and help to unmute each other's voices. So what do you say, panelists?
I was actually just looking at those two questions, right? And I don't want to flip so let me do the non-binary first. I don't want to flip that back on the person who asked the question, but because I'm not non-binary, I need help from people who are, right? So I don't know what the image would be, because I'm only coming from, she, her, and hers. And so I think when we have non-binary people, I need your help. I need your help to help me see differently. What is your image? What would that look like? How do you see that? If it's in art, what would that art piece look like? If it's in song, what would that song be? What would the lyrics be? If it's in prose, what would the writing be? I need help. And so my initial response is, I'm making room for you. And are you willing to share your story with me so that I can help with the sharing of a non-binary queer imago Dei, because I can't do it myself. There is no way. For me to do it myself is to be that voice for something that I don't have a clue about. So that's my first response to that one. The other one about women muting other women is to garner the courage that Sister Zen talked about when she was talking about this prophetic voice. I got it in my notes somewhere. She talked about these C's that were happening, right? And one of them, I believe, was courage. What is needed: courage, commitment, consciousness, conviction, and compassion. That to identify, you are muting me, and I need to tell you that you're muting me, right? And I need to have the courage to tell that to a group of women. I tend to try to help people with that, because I believe that the woman at the well at Samaria was muted by the women of her community, which is why she was at the well alone. Because the women had muted her, and what Jesus did was help her find her voice again.
Yeah, that, and I also a couple of things that I think kind of relate here that I hear coming from you, Timone, and from the questions from the audience are art interprets us to ourselves, and our response to this art will tell us a lot about who we are, right? So the same way, if someone is muting us, it's saying a lot about them. And when you talk about the need for compassion, maybe sometimes what we need to do is to wonder what kind of reach out or warmth we can provide to someone who is afraid of their own voice, so they need to mute yours. I see a lot of people who have just carried so much weight around in their lives that can't find a way to let go of that. And so the only thing that they do is they want the safety, right? Not the fearlessness. And so I think part of it maybe is to just allow spaces that are creative, like, I mean, what Sister Anne was doing, what you were doing in storytelling and in meditation, for these kinds of things that we're carrying inside of us to come out, to speak, right? And that's the only way we're going to be able to learn about each other, because I think so much, I mean, I think about Armonía and what happened to her in all of the hate that she got on social media. And then people started kind of posting and saying, what does this say about you, that you feel so threatened by an image of God that is hers? This is Armonía. She needs this for her own voice, her own dignity, to find a place for herself, right? And I think that the more we can encourage each other to move away from making pronouncements and into creatively exploring what is in our hearts, which is what you and Sister Anne have taught us, I think we can start creating these bridges with each other that won't be about building walls, right? And I just wonder about how we then make these subversive, profound statements like what Armonía is doing here be invitations to your own subversive, profound statements. You don't have to make hers, you can make your own, I think.
Okay. Sister Anne, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, or.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Imago Dei is not, it's not a closed category, you know, wherever you are created in the image and likeness of a loving, compassionate God. I just heard the Pope talk about LGBT children and say to their parents, God loves your children as they are. Imago Dei is an inclusive, all-embracing notion, just like we see in the Creator in Harmonious Arch. So you carry the model, and you model this image in yourself. I think we need to think more deeply about that we carry and we model this image in ourselves as women, your life, your soul, your body. Sometimes structures in society can be so corrosive that we become their agents. And I honestly think it takes conversion. It takes self-liberation from those structures that harm us and make us harm others, including women. So we need to overcome being wounders, to become wounded but compassionate healers.
So well said, Sister Anne, going back to last night when Sister Carol was talking about to do the external work, we have to also do that internal work of healing so that we don't perpetuate that wounding. So well said. I think we have time for a couple more questions. So Loretta asked, can you say more about women's prophetic voices that have facilitated change for the common good, giving modern day examples? And also, I think another one that I see on this list that I actually thought this person is kind of reflecting something that was brewing in me. While I feel God within me and feel I am made in her image, art seems confrontative, yes, vulnerable to a point of sadness for how ingrained only male imaging has permeated my soul. If I dwell on female imaging, will that cure and enlarge my interior imaging? So either of those questions, however the panel would like to approach that.
Well, I'd love to bring up two women that I think are extraordinary prophetic voices. I'm a big, gigantic fan of our incredible women religious. And of course, yesterday, listening to Sister Carol Lynn. But I would say, think about Sister Helen Prejean and what she has done in relation to capital punishment, and just the extraordinary work that she has done in this country, and the example that she has given of dedicating your life to doing God's work with the most maligned of people in our society, right? With those that have been incarcerated and marked for death. And I remember being so moved the day that Pope Francis made the pronouncement against capital punishment in all cases, and listening to her on that day and what it felt like for her after these many entire lifetime of giving herself to this. And then also Sister Simone Campbell. And I wanna put in a plug for the work that she's doing with Network. They have come up with this beautiful and amazing resource, which is a voting, I think it's a voting priority scorecard, but if you go to the Network website, to help us to discern as really thinking Catholics in relation to this election, and to reclaiming the common good. And so these two women for me are amazing examples, and I'm a huge fan.
And I would like to add, think of Salif Johnson, former president of Liberia, Lima Gbowe, who inspired a peace process in Liberia. Wangari Maathai, who changed the conversation about climate change. I could tell you more about African women who are prophetic and changing lives in Africa and in the world, but we don't have the time. The examples are legion.
I think the other question was about, should we just have female images to
yeah, it was sort of like,
if I
how did
just
it
dwell,
heal?
right, if I dwell on female imaging, will that cure and enlarge my interior imaging? My quick answer is no, right? That's my quick answer, because for me, God is not either or, right? So God is not male imaging or female imaging, but God is creation. And so much more is in my understanding of God. And it's probably because I am like in my 5th year of gardening now. And so when I'm in the garden, I was just like, so you started off with just 2 little green, leaves, and now you are a butternut squash. And so I'm seeing God in creation like that. So I believe that what helps us better than the male or female imaging is to be able to see God in your conversations with people, to be able to see God in the work that you're doing in a classroom, in the work that you are doing at a board meeting. And so to see God expand your own limitations, right? And to constantly be reaching for how God is going to present God's self to me and be amazed. Thinking about women who have been working toward the common good, I watched Journey Films documentary on Dorothy Day, as someone who was really working to help the common good. It wasn't that Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement was going to make her rich. I'm thinking about, and I cannot recall her name right now, but the woman who was working with Cesar Chavez in the farm workers movement, right? And I really cannot, it's like Dorothy something. I can't remember her name, but there are women who, what is it? Dolores, yes. I'm like, there are women who they're out here, they're doing some stuff and they're putting themselves on the line, and it's not just for them, right? It's not for their own advancement. It is about the common good. How can we lift up others who are struggling? So it's happening. I think we just have to notice.
Yeah, and I would like to say thank you to Cecilia for mentioning Sister Simone, my sister. I probably call her my sister. And I think it's not about either or. We need to become more inclusive, because God is always greater than our images. Doesn't matter if it's God is greater than our images. But we can always express a piece of God by who we are. Whether we are women, or as men, LGBT, whoever we are, I honestly think we carry a piece of God in us. We need to celebrate that more. The problem is when one gender monopolizes the imaging of God to their advantage.
Well, we are at 12:31, so we are at our time. And I thought that was a good place to end. And I want to say thank you to all of our panelists for a very rich reflection and discussion about unmuting our prophetic voices. And so I want to say also thank you to all of the audience members and your flexibility and your contributions both in the Q&A and the chat. And I wish you a life-giving, enriching, and challenging conference for the rest of the day. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much to panel one. Just want to let everybody know that we're going to take a lunch break at this time, but we look forward to you joining back with us. Our second panel is going to begin at 1:45 p.m. and we will have Heidi Schlump, Judith Valenti, Jessica Mesman, and Michelle Nickerson talking to us about women leading in media. We look forward to seeing everyone then.